Hi everyone, welcome to chapters 10 and 11, which is all about biogeography. This is the only time in our semester that I'm going to recommend that you don't just go through and read the chapters. I cover a very small portion of what's in chapter 10 and 11, the things that I think are the most important. But I would recommend watching these lectures, and then if there's anything that you need clarification about, going back to your textbook and finding those specific items in order to get some clarification, but not necessarily reading through all those chapters, although if you would like to, you are obviously more than welcome to. And so we're going to talk today about kind of why certain types of life occur in certain places, how evolution and speciation work. Here we have pictures of giraffes, which are kind of this classic example of that people use to think about evolution, like why do these animals have these really long necks and how did they get like that? And so what is biogeography? Biogeography in its most basic form is the spatial distribution and variation of life. So what does the presence of a species in a place tell us about that place and vice versa? So here is the world's southernmost baobab tree in South Africa, which are these really kind of beautiful, intricate trees. So we're going to talk about flora and fauna. Flora, which refers to plants, and fauna, which refers to animals. So here is a picture of our rhinoceros in Kruger National Park in South Africa. Biogeography mostly looks at flora or plants. Plants form the basis of the food webs in ecosystems, and so it's more helpful to look at plants because those larger animals or any animals really rely on plants in some way, even if they're removed from it, right? Even if a lion doesn't eat plants, they're a carnivore, what they eat ate plants. So it's all connected to that flora. So again, you can see here another picture from Kruger National Park. You have a buffalo eating some type of plants, these young lions kind of eyeing this buffalo. So you kind of have that whole food chain represented right there. So ecosystems are basically short for ecological systems. This includes all living things plus non-living inputs and outputs. So here is ecosystem, right? We have solar energy coming in, plants are making chemical energy, the animals are eating the plants, this puma is eating this deer. So it's kind of an entire, cycle of life and energy that's happening. They exist at all scales. So we can talk about the ecosystem of Southern California, or you can talk about the ecosystem of your backyard. You don't have to talk about the ecosystem at any specific scale. It depends on what you're trying to look at. There's a difference between food chains and webs. Mostly, especially when you were growing up, you might have heard the food chain. A food chain is a direct passage of from one organism to another of nutrients. So this grasshopper is eating this grass, this rodent is eating this grasshopper, and then this owl is eating this rodent. So there's this kind of direct chain that's happening. More complex is a food web where everything is interconnected, and this is kind of more indicative of what things actually look like in ecosystems, right? If there's a few things that are eating this grass, this owl is not just eating one thing, it's eating a couple of different things. They exist at different places in the food web. And removing one of these things from the food web can affect many, many, many other things, right? So if this deer is not here to eat this grass may become overrun and choke out some other type of vegetation that some other animals rely on. So everything is connected. But this is the way that primary energy transformation mechanism, which means, so this is how you are taking that solar energy that comes into the planet, right, that helps grow these plants, how it's making its way up to these owl or this fox or something else. So again, food change, just to simplify it again, the fundamental unit of food change is producers. called autotrophs, and these are self-feeders. Producers are eaten by consumers. So we have this phytoplankton. These guys are producers. The primary consumers, which are considered herbivores, are these krill right here. Secondary consumers are considered carnivores, and right here at the top we have this man at the top. He is also a secondary consumer, right? He's eating the fish that are eating the krill that are eating the phytoplankton. And so they can form the basis of a food pyramid. And then decomposers, start that process all over again. So whether that means that something has died or from animal waste, right? Decomposition happens, helps provide nutrients to the bottom of the level. And I'm going to put Wonder Woman at the top instead of the guy, which is always at the top of the food chain or food pyramid or food whatever graphics. So again, food chains, energy is inefficiently consumed between different levels of the food pyramid. So basically you're losing some energy along the way. Those plants at the bottom, those producers use energy most efficiently, and more gets wasted as you go up because it's used by that organism to move around and do what it has to do. We also kind of have pollutants that happen during the food chain process. Oops, sorry. So here you can see we have contaminants that are washed up into the water. They build up into the sediment. Those contaminants kind of get eaten by this fish and this fish, and by the time it gets to us, we could have a lot of toxins in, especially fish are a big one. So if you're pregnant, there's certain types of larger fish that you're told to not eat or to eat very sparingly, tuna being one of them, because they are farther up that food chain and they have consumed more and more pollutants as they go. And so how is this all of this geographic? Because again, we're in a geography class. Basically, more sunlight and more water equals more plants. More plants equals more animals or more biomass. Biomass is really just how much living stuff is in a place. A rainforest has a lot more biomass than a desert does. And has higher net primary productivity, right? So it's producing, it's taking in more energy, it's producing more biomass. And so we can look at different biomes and climates, and some of them are going to have lots and lots of biomass, more sunlight, more water. If you think about this, where are most rainforests, right? They're near the equator where it's getting the most amount of sunlight. So again, we talk about biomass and net primary productivity. Here's a picture in Patagonia, Argentina. So right here you have much lower biomass. Not that there's still not biomass there. There's plenty of plants here that are being, these are your producers that are being eaten by consumers. But in a place like the Cameron Highlands in Malaysia, there's certainly a lot more water, a lot more sunlight, a lot more biomass, and a higher net primary productivity. There are some other facts that influence biomass and net primary productivity. The first is topography, right? It's really hard for vegetation to grow on very, very steep hillsides. So if you look at this scarp here, you can't really grow much happening here, right? As opposed to when you get into the valley, you can grow a lot more vegetation. Elevation, the higher up something goes, the colder it gets and the harder it is for a lot of plants to survive. Being on that windward versus leeward side, we talked about windward and leeward side of mountains, right? That whether or not they're getting rain makes a big difference. Their orientation to the sun, which is UBAC and ADRET. UBAC, it gets a lot of sun. The ADRET side does not, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. The drainage of water. So where is the surface water flowing? Where is it winding up? So riparian vegetation is vegetation that occurs within river valleys, and more water is ending up there than at other places in the drainage basin. So you're going to have more vegetation in riparian corridors. And the other thing is the soil, right? Some types of soil are more fertile than others. So volcanic soil is very, very, very fertile. Hawaiian Islands are made up of volcanic soil, And if you're on that windward side of the mountain where you're getting a lot of rain, you're going to have some pretty lush vegetation there. Some soils can hold more moisture than others, depending on if it's a small grain soil or a large grain soil. There's also something called vertical, excuse me, I keep hitting that button, vertical zonation, which means as you go up in elevation, your type of vegetation is going to change dramatically as you go up, depending on temperature, topography, and if you're on a windward versus a leeward side, and again, what the temperature is. And eventually you will get up high enough that you are going to be above that tree line. So if you have mountains that are high enough up near the top, there's going to be no vegetation. And so if we look at this picture, looking in a riparian area in a canyon in San Diego, you want to think about where is the most vegetation in this picture. So here is the UBAC side of that valley. It's getting more sunlight, so it's getting more vegetation. Here is the Adret side of that valley, so it's getting less vegetation, less sunlight. And basically that just has to do with its orientation. There's north facing there. So we are going to break there, and then we're going to come back and talk about natural vegetation, native plants versus invasive and non-native plants, and we're going to talk about evolution and speciation.